I'll tell you in English, but I heard it in Apache. And the name for the one that created the earth, people lived underground because it was dark all the time. There was just a little bit of light, and then there was this super being, I guess, and the grandmother told him, okay, I'm going to put you here, you're going to climb up this, and I'm going to put you in my back, in my bag, and we're going to climb up. And it was very steep. So they did, and then she told him, she gave him instructions. We can't talk, they will hear us. But there are beings up there that have light, and they're singing, and what you do is you grab some of the light and you run around the earth. And so that occurred. And then they had night and day. And they were happy about it, you know. So there's that kind of stories that my auntie used to say. They are telling people to go to church, you know. I think the government gave each church like $1 million to build it, you know, so that the Apache people would begin believing in that Jesus and everything else. So my auntie would say, the super being that we have, I think Brian will tell you more about it, but we have a name for it, and she said, that's my Jesus, she would say. I was born November 2nd, 1953. Not that old, but in my family, our hair gets white right away. I was born in Santa Fe, I think. I'm not sure, because long ago, you know, they, people were just born on the reservation, and the field nurse would go out and weigh the babies and write that down. And my dad is half Navajo, but he stayed behind because his mother's Apache Jicarilla, and my mother was fourth Jicarilla. And she was raised by her grandparents, and they lived northwest of the reservation, you know, Colorado is right next to our reservation. Before the reservation existed, I don't know, but I hear stories about how, and my dad used to tell stories, and I've heard stories from other people. My mom had stories that she talked about. The stories I know are the ones where the government gave the land to the Jicarilla, and there were, I think, 11 men that went to the president. Ha'anina ata Ilaji, Grover Cleveland. Yeah, he's the one that signed an order that the land would belong to the Jicarilla, because originally the land that the Jicarilla used was large. It was too cold here during winters, And my dad used to tell me a story. He said one of his friends there was steps where the old clinic was. And then he said he jumped in the ring when there was snow and he disappeared. There was so much snow that fell a long time ago. And so the people asked for another piece of land that was warmer. So then we got the southern end of the reservation given to us Jicarilla people. My mother used to take care of her sheep because my dad went to the service. He was a Marine at Iwo Jima. And when he returned, there's a town 3 miles east of here, east of Dulce, and there was a lot of liquor stores. Mm-hmm. That's all it. And I remember when they had a post office, restaurants, cafes, but they always sold liquor. That's what my parents did. You know, when my father was still in the service, my mother had sheep, and she took care of it a lot. You know, when the sheep shearers would go out on the reservation, she told them, no, there's going to be another snowfall. And they said, we're going to tell the superintendent. And she could speak Spanish, and they were Spanish speakers. So she argued with them, and they didn't listen to her. They started telling her, the superintendent we're going to tell the superintendent. And she told them, go ahead and tell the superintendent. She was very angry. And so they left. They would shear sheep for the other people, you know. And then, sure enough, another snow fell, another snowstorm fell, and a lot of people lost their sheep. So they all moved back to town, and there was a train that came through town. And I remember because I would hear the sound, and I could see the smoke, and I would tell my sister, let's go outside, the train is coming. We talked in Apache all the time. So I would tell her, let's go outside, and we would run out and wave at the guy driving the train, and he would do the horn for us. But I guess because he was getting close to a store, it was called the Mercantile Store, and he would stop there. People would be talking to each other. Where are you coming from? Oh, from home, up the canyon, or down the canyon. So that was like where they got their news, you know. There was no newspaper, nobody. People could read, and they could speak English, but then they preferred Jicarilla, so they talked and talked. And I remember being afraid of other people. I would, Apache women wore shawls a lot, and they had their own style of clothing. So my mother sewed her own clothes, and she wore a shawl, so I would hide behind her shawl. And the people got together, you know, where the train came, and there were a lot of stories, but funny stories, you know, and they would laugh about it. Everybody would laugh, and usually we have 2 clans, the red side and the white side, which is, you know, that's, we have a foot race, And one of my brothers, he used to be a head runner for our side, which is the red side, because we're a matrilineal tribe. The stories I heard and that my dad told me is that in Apache we say that it's the land where people moved, you know. And during the winters, they would go down even into Mexico. And during the winters, during the summers, they would be in Colorado, and you know. So they really traveled a lot through the, you know, which is now the United States. At the time, it was just regular land. And at one time, the government told the Jicarilla, we're moving you down to the southern part of the New Mexico. And my mother said, Apache people, you know, racing is part of their way of life. So there were a lot of stories I heard. They would hunt buffalo, and my father said even some people had buffalo that stayed near the tribe, you know, near the people, where the people were. But they went and hunted buffalo, and then they got moved, and Apache people didn't, if they didn't like where they were, they moved. So they only moved at night, so they wouldn't be seen during the day, you know. And so the government gave them the land. They didn't give them the whole big area, which is usually what they do with, you know, the pueblo. They gave them their little spots. What Apache people did was with the seasons, you know, they would move. And so they were like constantly moving. Yeah. So you get there, you know, and they didn't have horses in those days. They had buffalo and they had dogs. So that was, you know, their main way of traveling. And that was a good way for them to live. They didn't like the cold and the snow or the heat during the summers. For food, they would dry the berries that, you know, were around. And when you dry it, you don't need refrigerators like we do today. And they made baskets lined with the oh, they lined it with pitch in English, so they could use that to carry water, you know. And the rivers were so clean that you could drink out of them, not even worry about all the contaminants that there are today. Um, and they didn't eat fish. They just didn't think it was, you know, fish have no heart. They're just one line that goes from their mouth to out, you know. And so they didn't care for fish, and they never ate it, you know. They only ate buffalo, deer, buffalo and deer mostly. And the government gave people sheep, like 6 sheep per family. And then they put in the railroad, and then the sheep shearers would come through, and they were Spanish speakers mostly. And so my mother, and many Jicarilla at that time did that. They learned another language easily. So my mother could speak Ute, and she could speak Jicarilla and a little bit of Taos, she said, and Spanish, a lot of Spanish. And she would tell me words in Spanish, and I would tell her, just talk to me in Apache. That's what I understand. So, but she knew English as well, and she was very, she knew about budgets, she was a very smart lady. And anyway, that's the way it was then. We learned to use the river. There's a river that runs through the northern part of the reservation, and there's lakes that were built, and the lakes are going down. That's because what's going on with the weather change. Yeah, nowadays it's really bad because the water used to be, the lakes used to have more water, and not like Arducy Lake, they plugged the little streams that were giving it water, and now it's like dry. There's just a little tiny bit of land that holds a little bit of water, but by the end of the summer it's dry. And at one time they would put fish, the game and fish people would put fish in each lake. So there was a lot of fishing that used to go on. And then they learned how to cook the fish, and they ate it. And so, lots of things have changed. And like some of our plants, the old people know them, which are used for medicine and which are used for food. For example, piñons. We would pick a lot of piñons right around where we lived at our ranch. And my mother would lay out blankets, and she used to sew a lot. She sewed her own clothes, and I learned how to use her sewing machine, and she would let me take it to the dorm, but she said, don't let anyone else use it, just you. And it was the sewing machines where you had to go like that with it, to make it move. And so later on, there was a man from Colorado that used to sell sewing machines, and he would come and oil it and everything, keep them going. And so my mother would sew pillows with ruffles around it. But she still sewed her own clothes, how she passed on. And I think she lived till she was like 76, and I'm 70, so she didn't fare so well. And my dad said he passed when he was 91, and my grandmother We don't even know how old she was when she passed. That's the way it was long ago. My mother would always tell us, don't stay inside. There's nothing inside. Go outside and play. You're young. That way you learn to do stuff. And she would dry the meat from the deer. She would, with her knife, and I'd put them up for her. Then I'd turn them over for her. I was kind of short for her clothesline, so I had to jump up there, then hold it with one hand, and turn the meat over. And then she would say, "Put it away now." I take it down, and she didn't want them outside at night. That was just the way, what happens during the night is different than what happens during the day, and you follow the way things are. So that's how we grew up, and we didn't have a big house. My father he was a little bit of a carpenter. He would build a house, then he would build an outhouse. And he would have one side, a little side, because that's where the kids used, and then the adult side would be regular size, And so when they moved, he would put in the outhouse and set it up. And my mother would say, "We need that right away. We need that first," because we had sheep and we would move them to a warmer place on the reservation during the winters, and then during the summers we would move them here where there was a lot of feed and lakes, ponds. And I was driving around down to the southern end of the reservation one time with my dad, and he was telling me there used to be between the rocks, the water used to seep out, and there would be water there, and now there isn't. And to me, that's a real concern for the climate change going on now. We haven't had a bear dance for a long time now, and they still used to do it, and we don't. Tổ chức ta hẳn sĩ con sinh ta cô, yeta ta de con in le Abáachi to ta di tse, to Ilkee Siijai. I was driving out that way, like about maybe 10, 15 miles out that way on the dirt road, and there's a little bridge that crosses, that the water that comes down this wash, and I was looking up on the hillside, and the pine trees, not pine trees, like the Christmas tree kind of tree, they're drying up. There were spots where there was dry, you could tell because their leaves aren't coming in. Instead of, Republicans against Democrats, put all our money from the wars into our own well-being, because in my opinion, we're creating the weather change. At one time, there was a man going around selling vacuum cleaners, and my uncle, he didn't speak English, he didn't understand English. He just knew Apache, and and he knew yes. So they asked him, "Do you want to buy this?" And he just said yes. And so they told him, "Well, this is how much it costs." And he said yes. And then my auntie came back and she said, "What's this?" And he told her, in Apache that a man came and was selling vacuum cleaners, so he bought it. And they had dirt. Inside the house was dirt. They had a little small house. And my grandmother had a little teeny tiny house. And she lived, inside her house was dirt, but she would keep it kind of clean. And she had a little stove. And she bought a turkey. And then my cousins were laughing because they said, "Grandma boiled a turkey, for Thanksgiving or something." But anyway, she would come up and she would give gifts during Christmas. And my dad, she always, because that was his mom, she would always give him a shirt, a real nice, expensive shirt. And me and my sisters, we got socks.